Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 141 of the Beyond the Ring with Big T Wrestling podcast here for Wednesday night, September 12th, 2018. And I have a very special guest here with all of us tonight, and we're going to be doing a great interview for you guys. I hope that you're all going to be tuning in, listening to us, and having a good time along here with us. We got a professional wrestler, Mr. Kid Kash, here with us tonight. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation here to come on the show tonight.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. Well, let's start off and talk about the beginning of your career. Around approximately, I would say, how old were you and when did you know that you wanted to be a professional wrestler, that this is the lifestyle that you wanted to get into?
I never wanted to get into wrestling. It just sort of happened. I was in my hometown and just happened to meet an area promoter while I was at the gym one day. And I grew up, watching wrestling. We got NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, where I'm from. And so I grew up on, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Roddy Piper, everybody that era pretty much, big fan of it. But I was also into martial arts and to some amateur boxing and stuff like that. So, that's the kind of sports that I was into. I didn't really play football or baseball or basketball. I did the wrestling team and then I did, Aikido and martial arts and just, amateur boxing. That's what I did. And I just met a guy that was a promoter. And he just invited me to, a show that he had. And he had the Rock and Roll Express and the Road Warriors and Tim Horner and a bunch of other guys, that I remembered watching on TV. And when I was in the dressing room hanging out, the guy invited me back in the dressing room. So what he wanted to do is actually try to talk me into going to his wrestling school and paying him, to train me to wrestle. But, I wasn't going to do it anyway. But while I was in the back, I just happened to get into some great conversation with Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express. And we just really hit it off and exchanged numbers. And it was probably 3-4 months that had gone by. And I was a pipe welder back then. With my dad owned a welding business. And we had a big contract out of Hershey Chocolate Company there out of Stewart's Draft, Virginia. And I was just having a bad day and not really loving my job too much. And on my lunch break, I was pulling a knife out of the drawer to make a sandwich. And Ricky's card was, for some reason, in the silverware drawer instead of, the junk drawer where everything else went. And I don't know, it was something was talking to me that day, and I gave him a call and asked him if he remembered me, and he gave me an offer back when I first met him. If I ever wanted to get into it, then he would be the one to want to train me and, get me through. So I just called him and talked to him for a few minutes, and he was like, you get to Tennessee, and I got you from there. And I just on a spontaneous moment went back to work. I quit my job, got my paycheck, and and I made pretty decent money back then, as a pipe welder. So I already had a good bank account. And I called my family over to my apartment and told them to take everything that they want, just don't leave anything in it. I packed my clothes up in a geo storm, and I drove to 4 hours to Johnson City, Tennessee, and I met Ricky, and he took me to Elizabeth in Tennessee, to a big farmhouse who was owned by a lady named Crystal, and I don't remember her last name at the time, but she actually wound up marrying Glenn Jacobs, Kane.
Oh,
And
okay.
Yeah, it was a house because Smoky Mountain Wrestling was going on in this area back then, and so Knoxville, Morristown was the home office, and Johnson City area was one of the big towns that they did. So a lot of the guys lived in the Johnson City area, and the new guys that came in from out of state and out of the country to work for the company also stayed at this house. So it was a big farmhouse with about 10 other wrestlers, and the longer you stayed, everybody would kind of like just go to other places. Some of the guys went to Mexico, some of the guys went to Japan, other guys like Glenn and went to WWE and doing the Isaac Yankum gimmick, and a couple of other guys. Anthony Michaels went to ECW. I went to ECW. Stuff. But that's how it started. I went there. He hooked me up there, and like the very next morning from getting there, because I got there, I left town probably about 3 or 4 o'clock or something like that. I got to Johnson City at about 8, 6 o'clock the next morning. After he takes me to the house and introduces me to everybody, he wakes me up. Let's go. And we went on the road for a week. And that was it. I mean, I sat in the back seat of the car for like a year. And I went with Ricky and Robert, and we get rides and have people ride with us, like Jerry Lawler and the Moondogs and Honky Tonk Man. I mean, we just had Jimmy Hart. We just had for that year, I was just meeting every wrestler that I had ever watched on television. And I just kind of became his protege. He didn't even charge me a dime for any of this.
Oh, wow.
And I just did that for a year, and then one day in Arkansas, Greg Valentine couldn't show up, and they needed a replacement, and that was me. I wrestled Wahoo McDaniels. Yeah, and that's how it started. I never got in the ring until that moment. I mean, I'd been inside of a boxing ring. I'd been inside of all kinds of wrestling mats areas and stuff like that, and martial arts type stuff. But the only time I was able to even get in the ring is if we got there early, to just get in and feel what the ropes were like. And, but watching people hit the ropes and watching the way they locked up and all that other stuff is how I learned.
It had to be an amazing experience for you, to get out on the road and get all this great advice from all these awesome professional wrestlers with all this experience.
It was amazing. Like the year before, I was, working in a Hershey chocolate factory for my dad. My dad's welding company, building candy lines, just not really liking my job, working, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and working 10 and 12-hour days. And, I made pretty good money to be as young as I was. And I was only 19 years old at that time. I just graduated high school. And, I thought I was more going to be a welder and hopefully strive to be a Golden Gloves boxer or something, or maybe a Naga world champion in, martial arts. wasn't even thinking about wrestling,
Yeah, it's something that just kind of happened.
Yeah, it did. And like I said, I had a pretty nice bank account at the time. So, I mean, it lasted me a good year, almost 2 years, so I was able to do it, a lot of guys don't come in with that kind of a bank account behind them to where they can just do it freely and not have to work a real job, So I was able to put my full time and effort into it for, that first year, definitely. But then when I started working, of course you don't make very much money at first, so Ricky taught me how to hustle pictures and, get hotel rooms and, just stuff like that, and taught me the business in along with the wrestling. And, but more of that, he taught me like psychology, how to read a crowd and, put a match together. And, even if it's, 5 people in the crowd, you don't have to go out there and do a damn thing, but you can still have one hell of a match.
Exactly.
And still not do anything, So he just taught me the old school, tradition way of wrestling and stuff. But as I was realizing that I was young and, You know, I was athletic and I could do these cool flips and stuff like that. So I kind of meshed this new age style of high flying from the early '90s. You remember when, you know, the Mexicans were starting to come to WCW, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese were coming to WWE, you know, and ECW was evolving into a much bigger company, you know. All this hot new style of high flying was coming out, you know, and people were digging it, you know. So I just combined the old school wrestling storytelling and selling and, you know, working a hold and stuff like that and working a body part, but then I threw in the high flying, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Was ECW your first big break that you had in the business?
Yeah, technically it was here in the States. I mean, before that I'd been to Mexico for AAA and a couple of other companies down there. I've been to Japan a few times and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, as far as a recognized, you know, company, you know, grabbing me and bringing me in their company, yeah, ECW was the first one.
And what was it like walking into that environment, that hardcore environment? And then, I've heard from other wrestlers in the business, that just going in that ECW arena, especially back in the day, like you could just feel the history and feel that presence when you're in that arena.
Yeah, the energy you can definitely you could definitely feel it. Uh, to be honest with you, it was everything was, you know, amplified. Uh, you know, times 10. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I just went in and did my style of wrestling, and it was different from everybody else's. You know, every character is different. Every character has his own method of wrestling, has his own finishing move, has his own walk, his own talk. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
was just a guy that actually had my own gimmick, and I was just different from the rest of the guys in the dressing room. So I stood out because I brought a southern kind of a flair to my character. You know, my first match up there, they, I wasn't expecting, you know, to get even cheered. But that's when I found out about the crowds, how smart the crowds were in ECW. Um, they had already heard of me before I even heard of ECW, you know, just because of, you know, me tag teaming with Ricky Morton for, you know, a couple good years and being one half and one third of the Rock and Roll Express, you know, that kind of thing. And just, you know, meeting good people like Rob Van Dam and stuff, and him and I having like really great matches on the indies, you know, because he was still technically doing indie shows and going to Japan and working ECW, you know, in his early days. So, you know,
Yeah,
it
Rob
just,
was pretty much all around. I even remember back in '97, he actually did a small invasion of WWE, if I remember correctly, back in '97 with
yeah,
it was him, Sabu, and Taz, I believe, and Jerry Lawler was leading the charge for the WWE guys.
right. Yeah. I think Jerry Lynn even did something with him too, I believe. Yeah, but I mean, the thing about it was stiff. It was, um, just like, I mean, it wasn't any different for me because I was wrestling these old guys my first 2 years. I didn't really wrestle too many indie guys. I wrestled, you know, like names, you know, like the Junkyard Dog, and I wrestled, you know, the Moon Dogs down in you know, Memphis, and I wrestled Jerry Lawler. Shit, I was wrestling Jerry Lawler when I was 21 years old, you know, down in Memphis for Power Pro. So, um, yeah, I was wrestling all these names and stuff. I was wrestling the Bushwhackers at, you know, state fairs and stuff with Ricky, you know, and all these guys were stiff, you know. The old school guys were just, you know, what we call crowbar, you know. So that's just, and if you ever wrestle Wahoo McDaniels or somebody like that, then you would definitely know Ronnie Garvin, which I had, and Greg Valentine, and I mean, these guys just club the hell out of you. You know, they just beat the shit out of you, man. And so that's just the way I was brought in the business. So when I got to ECW, the chair shots and the stiff forearms and the kicks weren't really anything different than what I was already used to, you know.
Yeah, because you already been there, done that. Yeah, by that point with all of the old school guys.
Yeah, and then my first night when I went out there, even Tommy Dreamer came to me, and when I walked in the dressing room the first time, and the night before, I was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, doing an independent wrestling show that Rob Van Dam was on, that his buddy Greg Price was running, and him and I already knew each other, but I had a really good match that night, and he come to me and he was like, dude, he goes, why are you messing with the indies? He goes, bro, he goes, you need to be in ECW. And I was like, what is it? I hadn't even heard of it yet. And because I was a journeyman from, the early days. I mean, from the time I got into business, I was on the road all the time, so I was just here, there, and everywhere. Puerto Rico, doing a couple shots there, and go up to New York from there, go down to Florida from there, go over to Texas from there, Chicago, come back down, hit Tennessee 2 or 3 times, and then, take a week off and then do it all over again,
Yeah.
So, but he was like, you just need to be there. So when I went there, everybody already knew who I was when I walked in the dressing room, even Paul Heyman. When Rob went to introduce me, he was like, I was David Jericho back then, by the way. And so when he went to introduce me, he goes, David Jericho, how are you? I was kind of shocked that he even knew who I was. And he goes, how's Ricky Morton? Well, then I kind of knew, I was like, great, everything's great. And he goes, good. He goes, did you bring your gear? And I was like, I sure did. And he goes, well, good. You're on in about 15 minutes. Can you handle that? And I was like, sure. And they put me in a 6-man tag. And when I went out, I'm dressed in the Rock and Roll Express outfit, so I was expecting to get booed out of the place, but I actually got a rock and roll chant coming out to the ring, and Tommy Dreamer even told me before I went out, he's like, don't be upset or hurt if they boo you out of the place, because they don't know who you are. But they wound up knowing exactly who I was,
Yeah, your name got around.
Yeah, it got, just being through, just working so many different shows all over the place, my name in my first year was, my second year was already in the magazines, getting like that little bit of exposure the second year. Third year, it's all over the place. Fourth year, it's all over the place. Fifth year, I'm in ECW, so it worked there about a year and a half, and then I had to leave because, they were trying to save all of their money up to have their first big pay-per-view. And it took a couple of years to do it, but in between that time, but whenever they finally got the money back up, they started booking me again. And so they called me back up to go to South Carolina, and I think it was Spartanburg, South Carolina, no, Columbus, South Carolina. And they were already going to give me the job back. He just wanted to see, he hadn't seen me in about 2 years, so he just wanted to see if I still, had it. And I did. I wrestled a guy named El Musco from Mexico. And we just tore the place down doing high-flying stuff and crazy stuff. And he was like, you coming to work tomorrow? I was like, sure. It was like, we're good. And but they made me pay my dues. The first year I was there, I had to drive to every single town. I lived in Johnson City, Tennessee, and I had to drive north every single week. every week. I was the only guy who lived in the South. So, well, past Virginia anyway. And so, yeah, for the first year I drove every single, from Chicago to Johnson City, from Johnson City to Maine, from Maine to Vermont, Philadelphia, New York, Pittsburgh, everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Then I just kept proving myself and having really great matches with the guys there, and just one day one night they put the TV title on me, and they started flying me the very next week, and even getting my hotel rooms. So they treated me really well, and then within a week after that, they actually signed a contract with them.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and Paul Heyman, if it wasn't for Rob Van Dam and then, Paul Heyman, and then along the way, just I got the respect of all of the guys, in the dressing room, and just got along with everybody. Everybody was there for the same cause, and we were all doing the same thing. So we all just worked together. We all had a great chemistry about us.
Oh, it sounds like it. You had a very successful run in ECW, as it sounds, and of course, next up was WCW, right? Am I correct? After ECW, was it WCW that was the next in line for you?
Yeah, it took about a year to get to WCW because I was under a contract with ECW, and ECW never ever really came out officially and said that they were closing the doors. They just did.
Also,
And,
when Guilty as Charged 2001 went on air, you guys didn't even know it. Just when that was done, Paul Heyman pretty much knew it was done, and you guys didn't know.
we didn't know anything. What told us that it was over is that the last tour was going to be in Kansas and I believe Missouri and a couple, I think Arkansas, and all the top guys they made us stay home. So anybody that was under contract, we wound up staying at home, and the rest of the guys went on out and did the shows. But most of them drove. A lot of them didn't get to, some of them flew, but not all of them did. And that same week when we were watching Raw, our boss shows up on Raw, and none of us knew that. We had no clue. We were just watching TV one night, and a couple of the guys called me, and they was like, "Hey, dude, you got to watch this." So I flipped over to WWE. If he wasn't coming down the ramp.
Yeah, because Heyman actually debuted on Monday Night Raw. I remember this actually clearly, like it was yesterday. They had, I remember they had Steven Richards versus Jerry Lawler at No Way Out 2001. Then the day after on Raw, Jerry Lawler was still there, but he was in a relationship with the cat back then, and then, they had a whole fallout there, and I guess they released the cat, and then Jerry Lawler said, well, if you're going to release her, I'm out of here. He left, and the next week, 8 days after that No Way Out 2001 pay-per-view, there was Paul Heyman just front and center on commentary.
Yep, and been there ever since.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, but we didn't. That's when we kind of figured it out, and then after that, it was like getting a hold to Paul was just pretty much impossible. And so WCW had called. I got a call from John Laurinaitis and Terry Taylor. Talked to both of those guys, and and they were like, what's your deal? And I'm like, well, I had a contract, but the company's gone bankrupt, so I'll do a deal with you. And they was like, well, we can't sign you legally, because you don't have a formal, signed release, and so that took a little time. It took a couple of months to finally get Paul on the phone.
Yeah.
And once I got him on the phone, anything that I would have been owed, which, to be honest with you, I wasn't owed anything. They paid me all the way up until the last paycheck, So, I mean, I never had a problem with him, and he was having problems with some of the other guys. I think Steve Corino and, a few of the other dudes that were trying to get their money from him. So, the deal was, I'll give you a formal release today, right now. I'll fax it to you. But just sign this first saying that we're paid in full, So I did that, and then went on ahead and signed with WCW, sat at home for a month, and then I did a Thunder, and had a good match with Easy Money, a guy that was in ECW, and they loved it, and so came back the next week, did a couple of dark matches to work on the character because they were just going to call me Cash at the time, and they didn't like my look, so they wanted me to get out of the baggy pants, and so within that week I was coming up with a new look, and and all that stuff, and getting used to the new name and stuff. So did the dark matches, and then the following week when I got my booklet, I went home, and they called me, and it was like, just sit at home this week. We'll get back with you. And so I had just literally signed a contract. I think I was in it for 2 months, and then WWE bought the company. And I'm, again, just like it was with Paul, I'm watching WCW, and there it was, Shane McMahon on WCW, So I was like, okay, well, I guess this is probably going to be interesting. So waited, got a phone call the next day from John Laurinaitis and said, hang in there. He's going to give me a call within the next week, and he did. And they wanted to keep me, and they wanted to definitely use me in the light heavyweight division, the cruiserweight division. But they wanted me to move to Cincinnati and to a company called Heartland Wrestling, and just waited out. And at that moment, I was fresh off of the ECW. I just signed with WCW. I didn't really want to set in a developmental camp for however long, 6 months, maybe a year, Didn't really want to drop my name, because I'd already established it and stuff, and it'd been copyrighted and, and all that stuff. So I just didn't really want to go change my name and character and stuff like that. Then plus with the contract that I had signed, it was dramatically going to be renegotiated. Yeah, dramatically. By half, of what I originally agreed on. And I was like, just kind of thinking about it. And Jimmy Hart and I were always close. So I called Jimmy and got his advice, and happened to be Hulk Hogan sitting like literally right beside him whenever I called him on the phone. So they both kind of, gave me some advice. And so I called back and I just turned it down. And I was, sorry, but I'm, at this point, a little more established, and I don't want to be sitting there not going and, wondering if it's ever going to happen, and maybe not. I could get lost in the shuffle at that point,
Yeah.
Because they had so many people. They kept a lot of guys, from WCW, so it was just a big, big chance of getting lost in the shuffle and not getting my name back out there again, so I just turned it down, and then within a month, I signed a contract with XWF. Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan signed a deal with QVC. The Home Shopping, I guess that is QVC, Home Shopping Network, and they put up a ton of money, and we did a bunch of tapings and stuff for a video collection to sell to the, to the channels, to the stations and stuff. And I think, I signed a contract, and it was non-negotiable. There was no compete clause. Jimmy got me a really good one. But I was under contract for like 3 years. We did like 8 total tapings and then 8 total shows. I did 8 tapings in Universal Studios, and then we did 8 other shows from Puerto Rico to Texas.
Wow.
And that was it. And I was their cruiserweight champion, had a big tournament. AJ Styles was in it. Christopher Daniels, a bunch of the guys from WCW, Kid Romeo, so won this tournament. Never lost the title because we never ran another show. And I stayed under contract for another 2 years. And continued to get paid for the next 2 years, and which was fine with me. And right after that little deal kind of just fizzled out, I signed with TNA.
Yeah, and I remember in WWE, or were you were with TNA after WWE, correct?
Before and after.
Oh, before and after. Okay, so let's talk about the first run in TNA when you signed your first deal.
It was a shambles. It was a complete shambles. It didn't matter quite so much because, like I said, for the next 2 years, I was still under contract, and I was getting paid, and it was non-negotiable. So, no compete clause. and I was working for TNA. Now TNA was brand new whenever I first went to them. I did their second show. They were doing pay-per-views on Wednesdays at the fairgrounds in Nashville. I did the very next show, their very second show, and I was there for 3 years after that. And the deal was we're fresh, we're new. This is all we can do right now. Can you work for this amount? I know who you are. I know where you've been. I know you got, popularity behind you and stuff like that. And I know this is what you made, here and made there. But if you can work with us, after the first year, we'll definitely take care of you after that. And I'm like, okay, let's do it, because like I said, I was getting another paycheck too, so it didn't matter. And I was allowed to do independent shows, and my rate was pretty high, So I was doing all right. I didn't really care. I just wanted more or less the TV exposure, to let everybody know that I was still out here.
Yeah.
And so it went pretty good the first year, but then I noticed that they're making more money. We went from there to Universal Studios, and then, guys that were absolute nameless and had nothing, had no gimmicks, no nothing the year before or 2 years before, were suddenly getting paid all of this big money that nobody knew about, and was being taken care of. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on. This is not the deal that I was told, So whenever I approached them, to like, I want more money. I mean, that was our deal. You agreed to it. And, why didn't you come to me and let me know? That was a part of the deal too. Once you're financially ahead, then you're going to come to me and we're going to negotiate a much better deal. That was the deal. But now I'm finding out the guys that I'm turning into stars, like AJ, the America's Most Wanted, Turned Abyss, they used my name and my popularity to work these guys night in and night out, put them over, and you make them shine and make them look good. And if they're beating me, then they're actually beating somebody with a name, instead of, just anybody. So, turn them in, making them stars, making them shine, showing them actually in the ring on the job training, on how to sell right and all this other bullshit. And, they're paying these guys already, twice the amount they're paying me. Of course, me and anybody would have a problem with that, So I started asking questions. They didn't like it. I started, look, just pay me, just give me what you promised me. And they never would. So just things started really going sour at that point, and a little bit of bad business was exchanged on both sides, and I finally got out of my contract after trying to get out of it for 2 years. But I had to do, stuff that I didn't really want to do, and it was kind of, not cool to do, but it got me out of the contract, and it never hurt me anywhere else, so it didn't really matter, but I didn't like leaving in those kind of terms anyway, so, but it was what it was. But from there, when I left there, I got my release at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I got a phone call from Jarrett, and asked me, because I've been asking for a release for 2 years. And then whenever they kept saying no, and then me and Jarrett had some words and stuff, and I just kind of found out where his loyalty lay completely, even though he was a wrestler and, and he knew all about the building the wrestling business with his dad and all this stuff. He just completely turned his back on the boys, the people that made his company,
Yeah.
that first year and the second year and even the third year, the X Division made that entire company. And
Oh,
it was just,
the X division was the main thing there because the heavyweight division, and I'm not trying to talk negative about anything, but the heavyweight division in that company, especially for the first few years, was mainly just Jeff Jarrett, holding the title.
I know.
And then the X Division title, you had guys like you had guys like AJ, Christopher Daniels. I mean, guys down there were lighting it up. And I remember one match that sticks in my mind is when they first moved to Universal Studios in Orlando, and then It was on when they made the Impact show on Fox Sports Net back in the day. At least that's the network it was televised in my area in Cleveland, Ohio. And I
Uh-huh.
remember you and AJ had a match on there, and it was the main event of like one of the early Impact shows. And
Oh
my
yeah, like a
my
Falls Count Anywhere.
yeah, my God, was that crazy when you guys went out in the crowd, and I believe you jumped off of one of the balconies or something over there on top of them. I mean, it was a crazy match. That was
Yeah,
great.
yeah. A lot of people still to this day talk about that match.
Yeah, that match was honestly one of my favorite TNA matches I think that
Yeah,
I've ever saw.
I've heard that from many, many, many fans. uh, it's cool though. I appreciate hearing it. You know, we really put it all out there on the line that night because we both got hurt. That coming off that balcony hurt both of us. You know, so yeah. And then on top of that, fighting out in the crowd, I actually got hit a number of times. I think we counted like 5 or 6 knots on the back of my head where fans were like sucker punching me whenever I was in the crowd with AJ.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Well, I was a pretty good heel back then.
Yeah, oh yeah, you definitely played the heel role perfectly, and I remember AJ was just so over as a babyface.
Right. I mean, it was Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. You know, I mean, it was Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat. You know, it was he had a great heel and a great baby face, and it just turned into a great mix. You know.
Oh, it definitely was. I mean, you guys did fantastic work, and
Oh,
honestly, the
we've
X
always had
Division.
we always had good chemistry. AJ's very athletic, so working somebody that is athletic as he was, with my style too. I was still doing some high flying at the time, but I backed a lot of it off just for the fact that I turned heel, and I'm a traditional wrestler, so I was a heel the way you're supposed to be a heel. You're not supposed to get cheered. You're not, your cheers are literally your boos. And that was my goal every night, to be the most booed guy in the building, So working on, like that, and then wrestling somebody who's just this young Christian Georgia boy babyface, with this really southern accent, and doesn't cuss. He's squeaky clean, and plus he's athletic on top of it. It just made for a great story.
I mean, the X Division, that's what definitely put the company on the map, but I think what really helped the X Division, go forward and really blossom was that rivalry that you had with AJ. I mean, that was really, really amazing work.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me what era of my career do I think I did my best work, and it's always been a real toss up between the ECW and the TNA. I got some really amazing extreme style matches, that people will remember for years, in the ECW. But then there's also those matches, in TNA with some of those new young guys like me and Amazing Red. If you ever watched any of our matches, it was like watching Mortal Kombat.
Oh, yeah.
We were just, I could throw his little ass all over the place, and he just was such a, like AJ, he was just that natural baby face. He didn't even have to talk on the microphone, period. He's just this little short guy who looks like the neighborhood Big Brother's kid,
Yeah.
So it's like the kid brother, I mean, he just, everybody loved him, and he was just so talented, low key, Kazarian, so I mean, we had a stacked division. I mean, hands down. I think it was world class, definitely.
Well, it's a shame that everything had to happen the way it did, and you had
Yeah,
to leave there the first time.
well, I did. I mean, I hated it. I came in the business, with, morals to try your damnedest to do good business. And I did. I mean, I did kind of blow up at time or two back in the day, but it was all because, I was trying to defend my career, you can't go into every dressing room and expect the promoter to have the same vision as you do. For what what you want your career to turn out like inside that company. And a lot of times those ideas just didn't coincide with each other. So there was a lot of times over the years there was arguments and there was, people getting fired. But the thing about it is many times as I got fired, I got rehired.
There you
go. It all worked out, and so I had a great career, I can't complain about anything. And even though it didn't work out so great the first time in TNA or the second time, I was still blessed to be there because I had some great talent to be around. The offices, your problems with the office is one thing, but, the guys that are making, keeping you a star and, making, still making you a household name are the guys that you're in that dressing room. And it was a shame TNA just did not know how to book. They had no idea. They were using the wrong people in the booking committees. They had announcer Jeremy Borash and travel agent, Bob Ryder in the in the talent relations.
Oh.
In the booking team too. I just don't understand, how in the hell you could get two guys like that and book a world known wrestling show. You just can't do it, and it reflected on how the shows came out. Look what they did in the end. Dixie Carter comes in and wants to be. She gets all this attention. She's got a wrestling company, and she's got all this attention. So what does she want to do? First thing everybody else wants to do, they want to become part of the show. Well, big mistake. Nobody cares about Dixie Carter. She's just an owner of a company. That's it. And what she do? She tried to be out there on the microphone. She tried to be, do skits and stuff and, be in angles and shit. And how they even made, I think, action figures of Dixie Carter.
They did. They actually did. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. And, and the company was always complaining about money, And I was like, well, why are you wasting money? Why in the hell would you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a Dixie Carter freaking action figure? It makes no sense. Why are you paying her also, even though she owns the company? Why are you paying her as a talent to be on TV? It doesn't make any sense. She owns the damn show. She owns the company. Why are you paying her a separate paycheck to be a talent that nobody cares to watch? And it's not helping your ratings at all. It's just, this is going to hell in a handbasket. Why are you persistent in doing this? And nobody wanted, you just didn't question them. You did not question them. If you questioned them, you wouldn't get booked for a month. Mm. If you question them more, you get suspended for 2 or 3 months. If you more and more, well, eventually they might let you go, but I doubt it, unless you're actually making them money, which nobody ever made them money because the company never made an absolute dime in the, 16, 17 years they were open.
Yeah, and you know what the whole thing was too, at least from what I heard, is that, Dixie Carter, she didn't really care how much money was spent or what kind of money was being thrown around because her parents that owned the Panda Energy Company were basically paying for TNA anyway and investing in it.
For a while they did, but they did put their foot down and started giving them a budget because they were lavishly spending big time. I mean, just the most ridiculous thing. I mean, you got the X Division being the number one thing that people are tuning into. The number one thing that people are talking about the most. So what do? Let's go out here and hire Hulk Hogan. Let's pay him a couple of millions of dollars. And when you don't pay anybody, even nothing close to that, anybody else. And then let's bring in Macho Man Randy Savage to pay him to not even wrestle. Pay him all of that millions of dollars to just make appearances. Yep. Okay? Let's get Kevin Nash in here. Let's pay him millions of dollars. Let's pay Scott Hall and X-Pac. And, and no disrespect to X-Pac, but, he's clean now and wish him the best, and I think he's a great guy now and stuff like that. But back then, I mean, you were lucky to get him in the ring because he was just so fucked up, in the back.
Yep.
So, you're paying all of this money to all of these people, for all of these guys, and every single week you're not getting one single extra rating for it. Nobody's caring. Why are you consistently paying these people when you got the real talent is sitting in your dressing room and it's not even being shown on TV?
Exactly. And, just like when they brought in Bischoff, too, I'm sure they paid him handsomely.
Oh, but to get Bischoff, you had to get his buddy, Herbie. What's his name? Herbie?
Harvey. Yeah, Harvey.
Jason Harvey.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Yeah, to get him, you had to get him too. So they're paying him millions of dollars, and then the other kid millions of dollars to be a producer. A fucking producer.
Yeah. He's not even working on the shows and putting his body on the line like you guys are.
Right. Yeah, he's not wrestling at all, and honestly, he might be a wrestling fan from way back, but what does he really know about wrestling, I mean, so you're doing production and you're making that kind of money when the guys that are the true talent is sitting in the dressing room barely paying their bills and barely getting paid because the checks had really gotten bad about coming. But those guys were getting paid. And then I knew, and again, there's no disrespect to anybody. If somebody's going to pay you that kind of money, then I'm all for saying, hey, pay me that kind of money, But it was just a disrespect to the company, to the guys who were the real talent. When I saw Brooke Hogan come in and get featured on TV with angles and then getting paid what she got paid, I was just like, I think I've had enough. And this was the second go-round, after I left WWE. And I was like, this is just too much. This is just too much. I mean, how much more can you disrespect your own company? It's not helping your ratings out at all. You got the owner of the company putting herself in angles and storylines with Hulk Hogan and his daughter, and it was just a mess. I mean, they went in there, I guess, blowing her head up, thinking that she was going to be the next Vince McMahon or something. I don't know, but she just put herself way out there, way too much. They put way too much money in it. The fathers put them on a budget, and then with that budget, they were only able to pay those guys. So everybody else was paid off of not donations, but I guess, I don't know, what do you call it, investors? They would go out and get other investors and stuff like that on their own, and then those investors would pay money, but you got to wait on that money. So it would be, a month, sometimes 2 months before you got a paycheck at one point. Wow. When I went back, I was getting paid great for the first year and a half. Second year started getting kind of like crazy again, like it did the first time. And I was like, no, I think I'm good. I can still make a living outside of this place. So I didn't really need it, because throughout the whole entire wrestling business, I've always been in the construction industry. So, while I was wrestling for WWE and wrestling for WCW and wrestling for ECW, when I wasn't wrestling on the road with those guys during the week when I was at home, I was working for the Carpenters Union, and making like $25 and $35 an hour, still getting 40 hours in a week because we would work 12-hour days for 3 to 4 days,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'd usually get a day off before I had to hit the road. And Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I would be wrestling, so, and on top of that, I went to school too. I, went to MTSU, up in Nashville or Murfreesboro. Did a couple of years there, and then I did the last 2 years online, because I was traveling. and actually with the WWE at the time when I finally did get my degree.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, and then with that degree, after about 2015, I just said, I think I'm done. It's been 25 years. I had 25 good years and successful years, in my opinion, for me. I wasn't Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin or Shawn Michaels, but I was damn well Kid Kash, and I worked for every major company in the world. And I've held pretty much every light heavyweight title in the world. So I have no complaints. I made really good money. Got my name out there the best I possibly could for who I was, and I'm pretty happy with it. So I wound up retiring and became a project manager, through having a degree and working all those years in construction. When I retired, I got a good job with a really big national construction company, and we built high rises and skyscrapers and stuff like that, and I'm a project manager.
Oh, it sounds like you got a real good job for yourself now.
Oh, it's good. I make more now, along with insurance and 401k and, the whole 9-yard retirement plan. I make out, even after taxes, I make just as much as I did whenever I was wrestling full time.
Oh, that's great.
So, it's a great living, and, thanks for the, continue knowing that it was going to end eventually. I knew that at a young age. I could see it in the dressing room that first year when I was sitting across the, the way of Ricky Morton and Harry Funk and all these guys, and looking how horrible they were getting around the dressing room, and I'm thinking, damn, and this is all that a lot of them only have. Some of them never, made that big crazy ass money like some people did, so they became famous, but they never, didn't make that huge money, so they got nothing now other than independent wrestling shows and wrestling schools. And I just didn't want to be that, I wanted to be more than that. I wanted to make more than that. I wanted to have a better future than that, So that's why I did school, and that's why I continued to keep working and in between the wrestling and everything else,
Oh, yeah. I know what I wanted to ask you now. In WWE, and your run there, because we talked about the 2 TNA runs, in your WWE run, I know, I got a question about it. Well, first off, I know you became Cruiserweight champ over there. That's number one. Number two is when you were working for WWE, was it a big difference working for WWE compared to like TNA and other companies? Could you tell the difference that WWE puts forward compared to the other companies, or was it really no difference?
Well, I've told people that's the same question. So I'll tell you like this: ECW was a much bigger company production wise than I had worked for before. Because I'd done independents and then the ones in Mexico, and, their production wasn't near as, as flamboyant as what we have, right? Mm-hmm. And then, when I left there, I went to WCW. Well, WCW was kind of like the WWE of the South, so the production, the trucks, the people, the catering, everything was much bigger than it was in ECW. Well, then from there, I went to, TNA, which was kind of back down on the level of what ECW was, because they didn't offer you shit, nothing. You had to just get what you got there, but then when you go to like WWE, you can definitely tell that they are definitely the pinnacle of all wrestling. They outshined the production of even WCW like 10-1, and it's just, when you walk in the back of a WWE show, you know that you are in the big time, and there's no question. You made it, Now, whether you stay there or not, it's another question, but yeah, you made it. You made it in the doors, you made it in that dressing room. You're stepping over cables that are as big as your leg, that go to satellites and trucks, and just, there's people everywhere, just everywhere. The catering is like going to a 5-star restaurant. It's just, everything's amazing. Everything's timed. Everything's scheduled. It's just so much more professional than any kind of level of business that you can really even imagine.
I could imagine that, and how was your run over there? Did you enjoy yourself in the WWE? And I know, I believe you beat, what was it, Juventud Guerrera at Armageddon 2000 and, what was it, 2005, I believe it was, for the
Right.
Cruiserweight Championship.
Yeah, I had a good time. I mean, what can you say? You know, I mean, you finally made it to the biggest company in the entire world, not only in wrestling but pretty much the corporate industry. You know, and you won the cruiserweight title. They're putting you over. They're treating you really good. You're getting paid more than you ever imagined you would get paid, because you get paid in so many different ways there. You get a contract pay, but then you get royalty pay 4, 5, 6 times a year, from everything from action figures to video games to trading cards to foam fingers to you name it, DVDs. And you travel a whole lot more. So much more. You do like the international tours and stuff. You just go all over the actual world itself, you know. And they treat you just so good. I mean, it's a great company to work for. I mean, if you can stay long, you can. I mean, there's some guys there that are still in the back that have probably been there for 20 years. They started off as wrestlers there, and got in good and did good, and now they got other jobs in the back. So it's a great place to even want to work. It's impressive, very, very impressive.
Yeah, you had the best of all of the worlds in professional wrestling, and now with your current job, it seems like throughout your whole life you got to live the dream of professional wrestling, and now you're just living the American dream of life after wrestling.
Yeah, well, again, I was always into MMA and stuff like that, so it was. I put 25 years of my time into wrestling, and and so I wanted to get back to what I have always done and always trained, because, regardless of how many days I was on the road, I always came back home and went straight to my dojo, and I trained with my guys and boxed and wrestled and grappled and, never forgot my boys back home,
Yep.
And so I got into some MMA since I've been out of wrestling, got back into some MMA, doing some fights here and there, just casually. Nothing, not trying to go to the UFC or nothing. I'm just doing all of this for fun, just to know that I can still do it. I just recently started working, well, not recently, I'm working with a couple of kids. They're called the Aero Club. They're from Texas, Oklahoma. They wrestle for a couple of different companies, but the bigger one is IRW. They do the Von Erichs a lot and stuff like that. So was helping those guys, giving them advice and, teaching them some stuff about tag team wrestling and even singles wrestling, character and, that kind of stuff, slowing them down in the ring and all that. Just came into a situation where I was asked to, be a tag team partner with one of them. And so lately I've just been doing like one show, like every 2 or 3 months out in like, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, where they normally run, Arkansas and stuff like that. But just having fun, not trying to go back to the WWE or nothing, not trying to go to the UFC. I'm just doing this one show for this one company, and once every so often, It's kind of like the fighting, when I was younger, I could do 2 or 3 fights a year. But I'm 49 years old, had a 25-year wrestling career. So I'm only good for, one good one a year now. So until I turn 50, then I'll probably, hang those gloves up and, figure something else out to be good at.
Hey, I'm sure you'll definitely find something. You've been successful at everything you've done. It sure sounds like it.
Well, definitely the wrestling, the MMA, I never really got it off the ground to be known for it or anything like that, But I got a pretty decent record in over a 30-year period, I got a 9-4 record, so I mean it's nothing to, to write home about, but it's still nothing to be ashamed about either, But like I said, that's a period of 30, like almost 32 years, in between wrestling organizations. I would be able to do a fight here and there over the years, but I consistently trained every week when I came home, So just been doing it my entire life,
Yeah, and hey, with MMA, I look at it as that's something to be proud of because you know what? Not everybody, especially that's into wrestling, not everybody's going to have the balls to transition from wrestling to go into MMA and get their hands dirty and get in a real fight, So,
Well, I didn't really have to transition. I was, like I said, since I've been 7 years old, I've been into boxing, grappling, and mixed martial arts training. So I mean, I've been grappling and I've done Naga tournaments for years. I did boxing tournaments for years. Coming up as a teenager and into my early 20s and stuff. So it really wasn't a transition of any sort. It was just remembering that this isn't fake. I got to get out there and really hit this guy. So, but whenever you train with some guys, every single week, whenever I was wrestling full time, I could only do it 3 days a week, with them. Before that, I was doing 5 and 6 days a week. Now I'm back to doing 5 days a week with them, for the last couple of years. So, it's just something that I'm used to getting beat on anyway. Those boys that I train with, they have no mercy. They don't care if I'm Kid Kash. I'm just another body to beat on is the only thing they look at, So, so it wasn't really any transition. I get beat on a daily basis, a weekly basis anyway.
Yeah, I hear you there. And you know what? You're still doing great. You're still doing great.
I'm just trying to keep moving, man. Some of the best advice I ever got was from a 95-year-old man. I think I was about 24, 25 years old, and I was sitting on an airplane and the man was 95 years old. He looked like he was probably in his late 60s and he was very great shape. He ran every single day. He still drank some scotch every single night, but other than that, that's all he ever, he just lived a healthy life, and he said, if you quit moving, then you're going to quit. Your whole entire life's going to quit moving. So don't quit moving. Keep going. Just because you love something when you were 20 years old doesn't mean you can't love it when you're 90 years old.
That is true.
Took his advice and I just try to keep moving, I don't want to get lazy. I don't want to retire. I don't want to just sit around and think about the things that I used to do. I'm proud of my career. Proud of where I'm at now, and have no complaints about anything. So I've been pretty blessed. I mean, I had every wrestling career, every business has its ups and downs. Of course, I had my ups and downs, but I would not change, honestly, anything. It was a good learning experience. What I did fail in, I learned from, and I never failed again.
Hey, you know what? It can't be any better than that as long as you have no regrets and you enjoyed everything that you did.
Oh, I have none. I really don't. I came from a little town called Waynesboro, Virginia, and I think my graduating class had less than 100 people in it. So to come from a town that nobody's ever heard of, to not come from a second generation or a third generation family, just to be thrown in it and to make a spur of the moment decision to move out of town to do it. I mean, I think I've done all right, and I'm pretty proud of what I've done. I mean, I've held some pretty big titles, that were recognized through the world, ECW, TNA, and WWE, and then, WWC in Puerto Rico, just titles around the world too, So I got to travel to 52 countries in that 25 years. So, I mean, man, I went on vacation for 25 years, man, and got paid for it.
Yeah, you know what? You've also had matches that are very memorable. Some that I still remember, and I'm sure some that everybody else listening still remembers.
Well, yeah. I mean, and there's a lot that I still remember too. but yeah, I mean, it was the chemistry. I mean, you got to have chemistry with that person, along with the talent. So you take two talented guys that know their job and know where it's supposed to go. Me as a heel, my job is to be a heel and not to get cheered. Their job is to be the baby face and to get the sympathy and stuff, tell a story. And I think that's just what stuck out in my matches. I was that new wave guy. I was that new young guy that could do the high flying, but I was also believable because I tried to make my stuff look real as humanly possible, and I sold everything as like I was going to the electric chair.
Yeah.
So.
And you know what? One thing I respect about you too, as well, is that you were just like an old school heel. It's like today you don't get that anymore. Everybody, it's like they cheer the heel, like cheering a heel is the cool thing to do. But like you were the true old school classic heel.
Well, even you. That's the thing about the wrestlers, though. They like it. Okay, they like being cheered. Who doesn't like being cheered? I mean, it makes you feel good. But you also got to remember what your job is. So like again, the thing about me is that I didn't care if I came out and people were cheering me. Then believe me, before the match actually started, they definitely started booing me because I didn't put up with it. I mean, because after the ECW showdown, every show that I did, regardless if I was heel or not, I got cheered just because I was from ECW.
Yeah.
So the first 10 seconds that I would get into that ring, I had to either grab the microphone or I had to physically work that crowd into a frenzy to where they hated me and they legitimately booed me. So, and then on top of that, you get some of the best compliments I ever got was, of course, from some of the boys, the Road Warriors, Hulk. Was standing there watching one of my matches one night, and whenever I came through the curtain back there, he stopped me and he grabbed me by the arm. He goes, "I got to tell you, kid, I've known you for a long time." He goes, "From day one when I first met you to now," he goes, "you are a credit to your profession." I mean, and that's just something that somebody of that popularity, that level, did not even have to say to me. And it's things like that kept me going, and then I would be the good heel. I would be that such intense heel that even at TNA, I would be pulling my bags out of the car or putting the bags in the car, and fans would come, coming over to me in the parking lot and be like, "Dude, we drove all the way from Jacksonville, Florida to Nashville, Tennessee just to see what you were going to do next." That's awesome. We didn't come to see anybody else. We only came to see you. We've been watching you on TV, how crazy you get and the stuff that you do. We had to see it live and in person, and you did not disappoint us. Thank you so much. And I'm like, well, I can't be a heel right now because the show is over with, you know what I'm saying? And these guys waited out, and waited on me to come out and stuff like that just to tell me that, So, and I got that a whole lot of times. There was a number of times that people would just walk up to me in the parking lot, and just thank me for being a believable heel.
And that is an awesome thing. I mean, you can't get a better compliment than that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you did your job. When you can turn a fan who already knows by now that this is just fake, it's staged, and they can appreciate you so much that when you're out there initially, you really do piss them off. You really do make them want to kick your ass. But at the end of the show, whenever they get to thinking about it and they see you signing autographs out in the parking lot, stuff like that, before you get in your car, then it makes them want to run up to you and let you know what they think.
Yeah.
And after every single show, I mean, there was even a couple of times that, the fans took it to another level, and I had one guy wanted to try to stab me with a knife. And Ryan Killings and Conan came outside, and things just kind of turned a little different after that, but yeah, I've had people come out to me and like pulling my bags out, getting in the car, man. People come walking across the parking lot with a baseball bat, tell me they're going to knock my head off. Say that shit to me tonight. Say it again. Say that to me out here. You awful big in that ring. Why don't you talk to me now? Just going off. And then there was sometimes, with me being the character that I am, I really had to fight a couple of the fans just so I could save face as a heel.
Wow.
Because there was too many other fans, that were standing out, waiting to see this happen, So, there was times I'm trying to just go home, and I wound up having to fight a fan before I even get in my car to go home, just so I could save face as a heel.
You know what? You're a true professional.
I came up in that era, man. I don't know what the boys are like nowadays, but I can tell you, in my day, if you weren't professional and you didn't show respect and stuff like that, then you didn't make it long or you didn't go far.
Yeah, I believe it because you know what, making it far in the wrestling business, it's all about that respect and being a true professional.
Yeah.
And my most requested question that I'm seeing here from people in the live chat, real quick, I want to ask you before I let you go, because I see this question being asked quite a bit. It's basically a two-part question. Who was a big influence on you as far as wrestlers? And the second part of that question is, what wrestlers do you know that you were a big influence on? Like, what wrestlers came up to you and told you were a big influence on them?
Oh, God. Big influences to me, well, of course, had to be, Ricky Morton, but as probably the biggest, as far as how to be a true babyface, how to, talk on a microphone and be believable, and, connect with the crowd and stuff. And then Tully Blanchard influenced me how to be a heel. Just having conversation with him in the dressing room and stuff like that, and listening to how he believed in being a heel. If you ever knew anything about Tully Blanchard, there was two types of fans. There was the ones that loved him to death, and the other ones hated his guts. There was never a gray area. There was never an in-between. You either loved him or you hated him. And that was the impression that I wanted to pull out. You either love me or you hate me. And so that's what I got. And then, athleticism and stuff. I got, just aggressiveness. Dynamite Kid was like a huge influence as far as my style goes. My high flying, I just kind of came up with my own stuff. So that was pretty much me. But just all the other characters. Shawn Michaels was even an influence because of his athleticism. He was just so damn athletic. And, I don't know. And then, let's see, there's some guys that I influenced. There's a few of them there in the Ring of Honor. And sadly enough, I haven't been keeping up with wrestling enough to really know their names that well. But yeah, a couple of the guys from Ring of Honor and stuff said that I was a big influence and stuff, and with the high flying, of course, And I think one of the Briscoe brothers used my finishing move now, the Moneymaker Power Driver. I think he calls it the what's their names? Mark and.
Mark and Jay, the Briscoe brothers?
Yeah, I think Jay, the J Driver or something like that.
Yep, Jay Driller, yep.
The Jay Driller, yeah. Well, since I've kind of retired and, now my move, the Moneymaker, he's, I see people are starting to use my moves now. And then, there's a couple of shows that I've been just kind of stepped in on just to say hi to people and stuff. A couple of the Ring of Honors there in Nashville and a couple of the WWE shows in Nashville. And people, just the guys coming up, they're like, dude, I watched you whenever I was a kid back in ECW. You got me wanting to be a wrestler and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's on both sides. I got the guys that I grew up, wanting to be like and emulate. And then there's guys like that looked at me like that too, So Oh, came full circle. It's pretty cool.
And you know, here's a compliment for you right here. I see one of the fans in the live chat saying that you know, this person's thinking that you must have been a big influence on Edge because they see a lot of similarities between you and Edge.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I'll have to go back and dig in my video collection. Check out some matches. I never really saw that, but I appreciate it. I would think. Yeah.
And
Tell them.
in TNA, by the way, I wanted to throw this by you real fast. In TNA, I don't know if you remember this guy, but he's actually a close friend of mine, and you know, he and I do a podcast once a week now called Wrestling Road Stories. He was a photographer, and he shoots WWE shows. He used to shoot the TNA shows. He had the big curly hair.
Yeah,
And
glasses.
Bill Otten.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was telling me about when you gave him like chiropractic tips, and you had him. You were telling him about that upside down machine or whatever it was when he was having back problems and stuff.
Right. Yeah. I went to chiropractic school for about 2 years. Didn't finish it because I wound up signing with WWE, but I changed my major and all that other stuff. I was going to be a chiropractor at one point, but by the time I went to WWE and stuff, I got more interested in the business world, you know, so wanted to get an international business and marketing degree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I totally remember him, man. That's awesome. God,
He
such a
asked me
fun
to
time.
mention him. You know, he's like, hey, can you mention me to Kid Cash real quick because
Yeah.
I was actually on the phone with him when you and I were messaging back and forth, and then I'm just telling him, you know, I'm gonna get a Kid Cash on the show on Wednesday, and then he's like, oh, can you message me? Or can you mention me? I mean, can you mention me? And then I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy, man. Definitely. I remember him.
Yeah, the podcast I do with him every week. You know, we started our own concept, and it's been an amazing ride. I mean, you know, doing this has introduced me to a lot of great people, and you
Okay.
know, I try to be outside the box. You know, I try to get my hand into everything, and you know how it all started for me because I like to tell everybody I like to tell everybody that I interview a little bit about myself, you know, so that way you guys know what I'm all about too.
Mhm.
You know, I always loved pro wrestling. I always did. You know, my ideal profession would have been to be a pro wrestler, but I was born with cerebral palsy, so I can never get physical in the ring.
Right.
And then I was thinking, you know, well, what can I do to, you know, be part of the pro wrestling business? And then, you know, that's when I came up with the whole idea of a podcast. And
But yeah, that's definitely a way to be a part of it.
I cover all aspects, you know, like I talk about the shows that are going on with WWE, Ring of Honor, you know, all that stuff, do reviews on the shows, I interview pro wrestlers, you know, like yourself. I have that podcast, Wrestling Road Stories, with Bill Otten, like we were just talking about. I actually and that's a podcast that's like one of its kind. And I just started another podcast that's like one of its kind called Rewriting Wrestling History, where, you know, I take wrestling angles, wrestling storylines, like working on the Montreal Screwjob right now, and pretty much rewriting it like, well, you know, what if this never happened? How would this have affected this? So, you know, I try to do all kinds of new stuff.
Yeah, it sounds cool, man.
But
That's
I gotta tell you, I appreciate you coming on here tonight and accepting the invitation to be on here with all of us. And everybody really loved hearing from you. You know, they love the story. Like, I'm just seeing all the positive comments, you know, on people saying interesting career. They loved your story. A lot
cool.
of good feedback.
Well, that's awesome, man. At least it seems all worth it now.
Do you have any shows coming up? Because I know you said like every few months you do a show.
uh,
Do you got anything coming up that you'd like to promote for anybody, or any? You have a website or any social media or anything? Maybe now with your current job that you're doing that you'd like to promote. I'd like to give you the floor to promote whatever you'd like if you have anything.
no, I just have my normal Facebook and the Twitter. They're both David Cash. One's David Kid Cash, I think. Um, no, and yeah, I'll be with IRW again, tagging with the Aero Club again in October. I think it's called Oklahomania. It's a big 1 year show that they put on. I think it's going to be out in Oklahoma. So, yeah, that's coming up in October. I don't know the exact date at the moment. Uh, they just kind of tell me I know when I'm leaving whenever they call me with my plane tickets. So, I don't really pay too much attention too much anymore. I just say okay, and then they'll get back to me when they do, And if they don't, then I honestly don't even really think about it. I just keep, doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. Like I said, it's pretty slow in the wrestling business for Kid Cash anymore. But, I mean, I still do, I got a WrestleCade coming up in November in Winston-Salem. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I do seminars and, conventions and stuff like that, appearances and stuff. So, I'm still out there, just not near as much as I used to be.
Any chance of you doing an appearance at WrestleCon in New York, New Jersey in 2019?
If they book me, I'll go.
Hey, you know what? I'll have to get on that because I'm planning on heading out to New York for Mania weekend. I'd love for you to be down there.
Well, whoever's booking it, give me a call. I'll definitely would love to do it. Heard a lot about the WrestleCon, but the WrestleCade, that's going to be kind of like an ECW get together. There's going to be a lot of the ECW guys there, and on I think the Saturday night show that they're actually going to run, I'll actually be wrestling C.W. Anderson.
Oh,
So
nice.
that'll be a good match to come watch. Me and him always had great matches back in the day.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one last question to close it out. If you were ever contacted by the WWE for a
Mm-hmm.
Hall of Fame induction, would you take it? Would you take your place among the greats in the WWE Hall of Fame?
Well, of course. I mean, I got to the pinnacle of wrestling. I got to work for the, biggest company in the world. And then not only that, I got to wrestle for the other companies, that were big time competitors to them, for quite a long time, And if you watch the WWE network, I'm on there quite often.
Oh, yeah.
Between the ECW, and I think they're even putting some TNA stuff on there now too. So
Yeah, and TNA has their own network, the Global Wrestling Network, so you'll be featured on there too.
oh yeah, well you got to figure I got 6 total years in that company, and with the ECW I had total 5 maybe 6 years in that company, and not to mention the couple of matches that I did there for WCW that I've heard that they played quite a few times, and then that and the matches that I had in the WWE. So yeah, I mean, just that alone. I mean, I was a cruiserweight champion there, and then from there, I was in a really, I would consider a pretty popular tag team, the Pit Bulls. So, yeah, I mean, if they offered it, I would definitely take it. That would be something I'd be very, very proud of.
Well, hopefully, you know what, one day you'll get that call and we'll get to see you take your place among all the other greats in professional wrestling.
Well, maybe you never know. But if it never happens, you know what? It doesn't matter. I've had an amazing career. Like I said, coming from where I came from and doing what I did and going where I went, there's nothing to complain about, man. I mean, it really isn't.
Hey, and I want to tell you on behalf of me, myself, and I'm sure all of the fans that are listening right now, for all your years of service in professional wrestling and for, the sacrifices that you gave for all of us and putting your body on the line for all of us for the sake of our entertainment. I just want to say thank you.
Hey, no worries, man. Thank you for being a fan and watching and always supporting what we do. If it wasn't, I tell everybody, and I try to tell some of these new young wrestlers, coming up, the fans are what makes you who you are.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. If the fans didn't dig you and didn't come to pay to see you, then there wouldn't be a you.
You know what? That's true, man. You gotta the fans is what's got your back when you walk through that door. Their reaction and their support. That's what carries you through,
Yeah.
and with,
Some,
without
sometimes, sometimes as sad as it is, that one crowd can make you or break you.
yeah.
That's something that I've seen happen before too. New guys coming in to the big companies, trying to get a shot just like anybody else, and walk right out, and the crowd didn't even make a sound. And
Mm.
it can just depends on what the crowd's hungry for, man. But if they're hungry for you, you got to keep them. You got to keep them hungry. So it becomes a job
And
from that point.
don't forget too. Not only are the fans important, but performers like you are important, very important to us fans for performing and giving us the great entertainment that we've come to love and enjoy every time we pay to sit in our seat and watch some good wrestling.
Well, hey, man, that was my job. That was my job.
And in the chat here in closing, everybody's putting Kid Cash Hall of Fame 2019 headlining. So, hey, maybe we could start that as a hashtag, get it trending. We'll get Kid Cash in the Hall of Fame.
Hey, that would be sweet, man.
And you know what? If you go in, I'll definitely be in that crowd watching you. I've been to 7 WrestleMania, so I'm no stranger to traveling around.
There you go. Hey, trust me, if they give it to me, I'll put that ring on.
Yeah, then we'll have to get an exclusive interview in person on camera with you flashing that ring off.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'll do another world tour with that ring.
Oh, yeah. Well, David, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation and being part of this and giving us a great interview. I'm sorry that it went overtime. I apologize for that, but really, I mean, it's a fantastic story that you gave to us here.
Oh, thank you, man. No worries.
And can you hold on the line for a second while I sign us off here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in tonight to episode number 141 of the Beyond the Ring with Big T Wrestling podcast for today, Wednesday, September 12th, 2018. And a big thank you to Mr. David Cash, Kid Cash, here with us tonight, giving us a fantastic interview. Honestly, one of the greatest interviews that I've done to date here on this channel. I'm truly honored to do a great interview such as this. So thank you to Kid Cash once again, and I will see you guys later on this week, ladies and gentlemen, for more coverage. And hope you enjoyed this interview. Leave your likes, leave your comments, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Good night, everybody.